Welcome back to another explainer. Okay, today we are unpacking what is honestly a true high-stakes legal thriller. It strikes right at the absolute heart of democratic power. We're looking at a landmark 2002 Constitutional Court case from South Africa. It asks some truly fundamental questions about who really holds the power in a democracy. Is it the lawmakers who write the rules or the judges who interpret them? It's a fascinating clash between the branches of government, and I am super excited to walk you through exactly how this constitutional showdown unfolded.
Okay, let's dive into this by looking at the core question that sparked this entire legal battle. Can a local court just step in and hit the pause button on a national law that has literally just been signed by the president? Now, we aren't here to debate the politics of the laws themselves. Definitely not. Rather, we want to examine the sheer mechanics of constitutional power here. When a brand new law is challenged, who actually gets to press pause, and under what circumstances?
Section 1. The floor-crossing debate.
To really understand this, we need to go back to post-apartheid South Africa. This was a nation meticulously building a new constitutional order and, trying to figure out the rules of its young democracy. The whole foundation of this debate lies in their electoral system, which is proportional representation. Basically, this means whether you are looking at national, provincial, or local levels, you are largely voting for a political party's brand, not an individual person. Because parties fill seats from a list, party loyalty isn't just a polite expectation, it is legally significant.
So the crucial point is the anti-defection provision. Put simply, if a politician decides to leave or defect from the political party that originally nominated them, boom, they immediately lose their seat in the legislature. You can't just cross the floor to join a rival party and keep your job. This rule essentially forces politicians to stay strictly loyal to the party banner under which they were elected.
But the legal status of this rule was actually uniquely complicated in South Africa. You see, the 1993 interim constitution contained very strict anti-defection rules. However, when the final 1996 constitution was drafted, this rule was actually removed from the main body of the text. Instead, it was placed into Schedule 6, which was a section specifically designed for transitional measures. The idea was to keep the anti-defection rules alive temporarily, pending the passing of new permanent national legislation.
Section 2. The new defection laws.
Right, so for years, the political landscape operated under those temporary transitional rules. But then, in June 2002, the national legislature decided it was time to change the game. Parliament passed, and the president signed 4 very specific acts. These included the Constitution's Second Amendment Act and the Loss or Retention of Membership Act, among a couple of others. Together, these pieces of legislation created what they called window periods, where the strict anti-defection rules were completely suspended. Effectively, these laws would allow politicians to change parties, to cross the floor, without losing their jobs.
Section 3. The High Court intervenes.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the passage of these laws set off an absolute political earthquake. The speed of the pushback is staggering. On June 19, the president signs the acts into law. The very next day, June 20, the acts are officially published in the Government Gazette. And at 7 p.m. that exact same evening, an opposition party, the United Democratic Movement, or UDM, files an urgent application in the Cape High Court. Just 4 days later, on June 24, a full court agrees with the UDM and entirely suspends the new acts.
I mean, the gravity of this moment really cannot be overstated. With this interim interdict, a local high court effectively hit the pause button on national legislation. And we're talking about legislation that included amendments to the Constitution itself. A lower court had literally just halted the will of the national parliament.
Section 4. The Constitutional Court appeal.
As you can imagine, this completely unprecedented maneuver escalated the dispute straight to the highest authority in the land. Now, to understand the Constitutional Court's task here, we really have to look at a crucial legal distinction. On one side, you have abstract judicial review. This is the immense power to decide if a bill or law is fundamentally unconstitutional, and that is a power reserved solely for the Constitutional Court. On the other side, you have interim relief. This is a temporary interdict meant to freeze a situation to prevent harm before a final trial happens. The High Court used interim relief, but by doing so, they froze a national law. So the big question is, did they overstep?
And this brilliantly illustrates the delicate tightrope the courts have to walk. The Constitutional Court actually cited a powerful precedent known as the Sarafu case. That case emphasizes the need to preserve comity, which is basically mutual respect and partnership between the judicial branch and the legislative and executive branches. The branches of government are supposed to stay in their distinct lanes, right? The highest court is hyper-aware of not stepping on the toes of the elected lawmakers unless it is absolutely necessary.
So, leaning heavily into this separation of powers, the government argued their case forcefully. They claimed that for a single high court judge to suspend an act of parliament is a massive, drastic intrusion into the legislative domain. They argued it completely frustrates the democratic will of the elected legislature. In their view, if a law, and especially a constitutional amendment, is going to be paused, only the Constitutional Court possesses the immense authority required to make that call.
Section 5. The Final Judgment.
So how exactly does the Constitutional Court resolve this epic tug-of-war? You have a lower court trying to prevent perceived harm on one side and a national legislature trying to exercise its democratic mandate on the other. While they laid down a strict three-part test. They ruled that while a high court might technically have the power to grant interim relief against a law in highly exceptional cases, it must meet some incredible burdens. First, it has to be strictly necessary to avoid serious, irreparable harm. Second, the court has to carefully balance the interests of the person seeking relief against everyone else affected. And third, the intervention must be done in the absolute least intrusive manner possible.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the court applied that strict test to this specific case. The Constitutional Court found that the UDM actually failed to prove they would suffer manifest prejudice or real, tangible harm just by the laws being enacted. Furthermore, the highest court actually scolded the high court for simply assuming that harm would occur and for completely failing to explore less invasive ways to handle the situation instead of just blanketing the entire nation with a suspension of the law.
Because those incredibly strict tests were not met, we arrive at this final, completely impartial, mechanical outcome. The Constitutional Court upheld the government's appeal and officially set aside the High Court's suspension order. Notice that they also ruled each party must pay its own costs. The Constitutional Court was incredibly careful here, you guys. They did not judge the morality or political wisdom of floor crossing at all. They merely ruled on the strict legal procedures regarding who actually has the power to stop a law and just how staggeringly high the bar must be to do so.
Ultimately, this historic case leaves us with a fascinating lens through which we can view our own governing structures. The balance of power is never just static. It's a living thing, constantly tested and refined by intense legal battles exactly like this one. So as you reflect on this constitutional showdown today, ask yourself, how does your local democracy balance the immense power between the lawmakers elected by the people and the judges appointed to oversee the law? It's a lot to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the mechanics of the world around you.